Despite some serious backtracking on zero-emission mandates in some countries around the world, UK, I'm looking at you. It's generally accepted that sometime in the next decade, the majority of new cars going on sale around the world will need to be battery electric. For those able to buy a new car, either today or in the next few years, there's going to be quite the choice covering a range of different vehicle styles and price points. Those wanting to buy a used EV, though, they're going to have more to worry about than if they can afford the finance payments, if the car can make it to their grandmother's house several hundred miles or kilometres away, and if their car is going to be generally reliable. They have to worry about what life is going to be like with said car long after it's rolled off the production line, long after the company that made it has moved on to newer, shinier models. They're going to have to figure out how well supported the car will be into its golden years, and if anyone will actually help them work on it if things go wrong. So, today, I'm going to give you some buying advice based on one simple thing: how well supported various used EVs are and will be long after they've finished their first full charge. Although the EV market is more diverse than ever before, it's only that way for a small proportion of the population, those who actually can afford to buy new cars. Those are primarily boomers, followed closely behind by older Gen X customers. They're able to pick from a wide selection of new models. They can, more often than not, easily finance their purchase and don't have to worry about things like repair costs, at least for the first few years, because of all the benefits of a new car warranty. But if you're buying a used electric vehicle, the chances are your new-to-you car will have little to no warranty period left, and you'll have a couple of choices ahead of you when it comes to deciding what to do when things don't go as they should. In preparing this video, I've come up with recommendations covering 3 different approaches for used car ownership. One that relies on you buying a car that's still well supported by the company that made it, one that relies on third-party support and good parts availability, and finally, one that relies on you being willing and able to do some or all of the maintenance and repair work yourself. Before I get to those, though, let's get something sad but true out of the way. While buying a used EV is cheaper than buying a new one, it's always worth making sure you have a contingency plan somewhere in your monthly budget in the event something goes awry. This, by the way, is true of any type of vehicle, regardless of what it's powered by. If you're looking to buy a used car, you should add maintenance costs to your monthly budget. Ideally, that money should be put aside somewhere like a savings account. Sure, EVs do generally tend to have less regular maintenance requirements than an internal combustion engine vehicle, and there's less to go wrong. But when things do go wrong, they can be more expensive to fix. And if you're looking at financing that aforementioned car and you have an additional maintenance set aside every month, and that pushes you over the edge of your budget, you shouldn't be buying that car. It doesn't matter if you have a good credit that you can use to help yourself out of an emergency situation. If you can't afford to pay that money back after using your credit card, or you don't have a way to save up for a more predictable maintenance amount, it's not financially sustainable or, in fact, stable. Of course, there are few options around this, such as extended warranties. Both Kate Walton-Elliott and M have benefited from extended warranties, helping them when their respective plug-in cars, both plug-in hybrids, interestingly, decided to be very unwell. Both were very grateful for their extended warranties, but in both cases, what was and what wasn't covered under extended warranties was a little grey, and battery packs tend not to be covered under those standard extended warranties that most used car salespeople will send your way. Some also won't even really cover items like battery management systems or rapid charging components. Because the extended warranties are historically designed for gasoline vehicles. So read that fine print before you agree to buy and sign on the dotted line. Disclaimer about financial responsibility aside, let's look at those 3 different options. But first, I want to tell you about our new Halloween t-shirt for 2023, which you can buy along with this one, a previous year's design, over at our Spreadshirt store. Support the channel and buy a cool t-shirt. It's all good. The most hassle-free way of used car ownership is to buy a car that you know is still well supported by the company that made it. Generally speaking, the more mainstream the model, the higher its overall sales were, the more likely it is that you'll be able to find a local dealership who still works on them, and is also happy to do so. Compliance cars, ones built in small volumes to satisfy zero-emission mandates like the original Fiat 500e, the Chevrolet Spark EV, and the Ford Focus EV, to name just a few examples, were never sold in particularly large volumes and may be harder to get really comprehensive dealership support for. Although most automakers do try to honour a commitment to keeping a stock of parts and spares for vehicles long after they cease production, I was once able to get a heated windshield for my 15-year-old Toyota RAV4 EV when I owned it, very limited production EVs often cause real headaches in the parts department, especially if the part in question was originally only made in small volumes or comes from a company that is no more. I know, for example, that some suspension components for the Chevrolet Spark EV are now really difficult to get hold of as they are no longer in production, and really only aftermarket spares are available for certain parts. And for EV-specific components, as with older and less well-supported vehicles, automakers may make a batch of components and then wait until that stock runs out completely before bothering to run up another batch. That can mean a very long and very frustrating wait for parts. Vehicles that were also built as a result of partnerships can also be particularly difficult to keep on the road because neither car company wants to actively support them. This is the case with the Mercedes-Benz B-Class ED and the second generation Toyota RAV4 EV, both of which were built with their respective companies with help from Tesla. Examples of cars still well supported by their respective automakers, though, include the Renault Zoe in Europe and the Nissan LEAF, at least in markets where the Nissan LEAF was sold in large volumes for a significant amount of time. Grey market import LEAFs are very, very different. For the most part, you should be able to get those cars taken care of by a local dealership, as long as the dealership has a service team that's familiar with and has worked on said cars for a long time. Another good choice for the category of well supported by the automaker is, of course, Tesla's lineup of Model S, Model X, and Model 3. I'm not including the Model Y in this because it's not really been in production all that long, and there aren't a huge number of used Model Ys in the used market when compared to those other Tesla models. That said, those 3 other mainstream Tesla models have good after-sales support from Tesla, as long as, that is, you're willing to pay a fairly hefty sum to keep them on the road. Tesla's after-sales service costs are pretty high. And that's honestly not just a Tesla problem. It's the biggest challenge with most older used EVs out there, that you get serviced by automaker-approved dealerships. While support may be possible, the cost of doing so can be pretty high. Automakers and official service partners, be they dealerships or other companies, will only usually carry out official repair procedures. That's often because doing otherwise would actually void any existing service agreements they have. Those repair procedures will result in you getting a fixed car, but they're often not very cheap, as they sometimes involve replacing a whole sub-assembly in its entirety, even if it's just a single part of that sub-assembly that has failed. If that's something you're okay with, then the Renault Zoe, Nissan LEAF, Chevrolet Volt with a V and Chevrolet Bolt with a B are great options, as are the aforementioned Tesla Model S, X and 3. If your used EV is only a few years old, adding in cars like the Kia Niro EV and Hyundai Ioniq should be okay. But again, remember that sometimes even newer cars that weren't sold in spades have questionable parts availability. Before we finish off this segment, I do want to throw in an extra bone to the Chevrolet Bolt EV, that's Bolt with a B, because if your used EV is an early Chevrolet Bolt EV and it has a brand new battery pack that's been replaced under the recent battery fire recall from about a year or so ago, your car will have a nearly new 8-year, 100,000-mile warranty, even if you are not the original owner. That alone can pay for some significant peace of mind, although, as I recently demonstrated with my own Bolt EV, when other things go wrong, it can be pricey. We had our Bolt AC had to be repaired earlier this year, and it was pretty costly. So your mileage may and will vary. Which brings me to the second list of recommended cars. Cars that are well supported in the not official manufacturer way. At the top of the list, by a massive margin, is the venerable Nissan LEAF. More than 650,000 Nissan LEAFs have been made since the car's launch in 2010, and despite what you might think about the Nissan LEAF, the gradual upgrades it's gained during its time in production have made it absolutely worth buying if you happen to live near a third-party specialist who's willing to work on your car. That gradual evolution of the LEAF and its design has meant that it's also the perfect candidate for gradual upgrades. The Nissan LEAF is a car that you can, in many areas, readily buy upgraded battery packs for and pay to have fitted. It's a car that you can get various tweaks and mods carried out on, and there is a massive, healthy aftermarket parts and genuine used parts marketplace that you can take advantage of. The My Nissan LEAF forum is a fantastic place to visit if you'd like to know what's possible, and if you live in any major city in a market where the LEAF was sold in large enough volumes, the chances are that there is a used car dealership or an independent garage nearby who is more than familiar and happy to work on them. Of course, it goes without saying here that there are some issues with the Nissan LEAF that you should take into consideration if you're buying one used. First, original Nissan LEAFs with the 24 kilowatt-hour battery pack are likely to have a pretty tired battery. Their original battery packs were passively air-cooled rather than made use of active thermal management with a coolant loop, the thing that's become de rigueur for most EVs on sale today. But Nissan will charge you an arm and a leg if you go to it for an official battery replacement. That said, if you're willing to work with an independent specialist and you are okay with non-official Nissan service procedures, you can, as I said earlier, buy a larger capacity battery pack and pay to have it fitted, or in fact, fit it yourself. I know a few people who watch this channel who have original Nissan LEAFs with battery packs that have been fitted from newer cars. This has given them far more range per charge than their LEAF had when new. The downside is, well, if you've had this kind of mod done and then you need to visit a dealership, there is a significant chance they won't want to touch or work on your car. After the Nissan LEAF, in some markets at least, you might find aftermarket Tesla support. It does depend a whole lot on where you live, but in some parts of Europe and North America, you can find independent Tesla specialists who are willing to look at and work on your Tesla. And in this case, their repairs are often a lot cheaper than Tesla's official repair prices, and many of the people who work at these kind of shops are actually ex-Tesla employees who just grew tired of Tesla's work ethic and demand of a Tesla shop, and so have decided to either join an independent specialist or set themselves up independently. Finally, let's look at that list of cars that have the best support if you want to work on them yourself. And again, at the top of the list is the Nissan LEAF. That's thanks to the sheer availability of parts and huge number of aftermarket solutions that have been developed for the vehicle. It's probably the easiest electric car to work on if you're wanting to work on your own car and you want to have a well-supported and very well-informed experience. But at this point, I need to reiterate that if you are going to work on your own electric car, it is absolutely imperative to follow the correct safety procedures. This includes knowing how to deal with high voltage cables and how to safely disconnect and reconnect high voltage components. If you don't know how to do any of this, for goodness sake, attend a course at your local college or read up on safety procedures before you do anything to your own car. That out of the way, in addition to excellent aftermarket supports and parts availability, the Nissan LEAF also have a great online wiki and forum support, which means that for the majority of issues out there, it's likely that someone somewhere has already discovered how to deal with that problem that you are currently experiencing. And frankly, as someone who has just purchased an older electric vehicle that I'm going to be working on myself, the Vectrex VX1. We'll link to the video below if you haven't seen that particular video. Having a really good online website and wiki with resources laid out for me is so helpful. So if you're looking to buy a used older EV, it's really worth checking that that kind of community support is available before you hand over any cash. Additionally, the Nissan LEAF is still getting mods developed for it. Dala of Dala's EV Repair in Finland is actively working on a route to design a CCS to CHAdeMO converter box to allow the Nissan LEAF to fast charge at CCS charging stations. Few other EVs on sale today, or in fact that have been on sale in the past, have that particular level of enthusiasm and support years after the first examples rolled off the production line. So there you have it. My recommendation for cars that you should consider buying used if you want a car that's easy to work on, is well supported, and won't leave you worrying about parts you can't get hold of. Are there some other models that fit? Well, a few, but none are as well supported as the ones that I've listed. And on that note, we are done with today's video. If you have comments, you can drop us a polite note below in the Discord chat room, on Mastodon, or if you are a Patreon supporter, in the comments there. If you want more, subscribe, hit the bell, and follow the links below to regularly support us with a YouTube membership or a Patreon subscription. You'll also find links below to our Ko-fi, Bitcoin, and Swag store, as well as that aforementioned Mastodon server. There is no Mac Easter egg at the end of this video because I need to take a little bit longer over this credit bit. Scrolling on my right is the list of amazing Charged Up supporters, and if you are a recent sign up to the Charged Up supporter list and you're not there, thank you, Neil, and others for reaching out and telling us. I'm sorry. There's been some issues with our automated process that we've been using, and in designing a replacement credit setup, it's taking longer than we'd hoped, so please be patient and watch this space. And if you have recently joined and your name isn't mentioned here, I'm sorry. That list is just not getting generated while we sort out the bugs. But in the meantime, thank you to all of the people who are listed and who have recently joined. And our ad revenue is really not doing so well right now. It's about $3,000 less last month than it used to be. So you are really helping us by joining up from $1 a month and supporting this channel. Thank you. And if you are someone who has just joined or someone who is considering joining, please do, as we are still about $2,500 short every month. This YouTube adpocalypse continues. So with that out of the way, Shout outs out to our V2G Patreon supporters: Alan Tupper, Andrew Martin, Bennett Elder, Brophy Wolf, Chris Maxwell, Cypriana Plast, Dan Blair, Gordon C, Hey Esker, John Tramal, Carl Fox, Mark Eggleton, Peter Dillinger, Regine Fellows, Sean Tucker, Stefan Fremden, Stephen Williams, Tesla and the Gong, Paul Bricknell, Tony Moss, Carl Hodgson, Chris Centaur, Denny Hyde, Lance Schlall, Linda Irish, Mike Weeder and Paul Nelson. And finally, thank you to our off-grid supporters: Paul Conway, Kevin Burrowbridge, Stephen O'Donoghue, Jim Burness, Robert Flannery, Anne Han, Ellery Hensley, Rory Litwin, JP Fagerback, Dave Kitchen, Anonymous Freak, Andrew Glenn, Chris and Michael Johnson, Claywit, CPU Freak 101, Eric Knack, Joe Bresney, John Henderson, Laura Reynolds, Marcel Ward, Matthew Drobnak, Nigel S, Reggie Watts, Will Graylin, and of course Ian. And I'm sorry I'm taking such a long time in screwing this up today. Don't forget that we make videos every Monday, Wednesday, Friday and Saturday on the main channel, plus on a Sunday you'll find us over on Transport Evolved Take 2. And with that, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you soon. Good luck looking for a used EV, and as always, keep evolving.